Hello sir, good evening. Myself and Blezo Isaac are here to present about State Bank of India's capital risk. Now let's see what is a capital risk. Capital risk is a risk that a bank faces on losing of value of its capital. Now let's see what's a capital adequacy ratio. It is a ratio of a bank's capital to its risk, and capital risk is equal to bank's core capital by its risk weighted assets. Let's see what are the core capital that SBI's balance sheet contain. The Tier 1 capital of SBI contain paid up share capital, the statutory reserves, all disclosed free reserves and retained earnings. The Tier 2 of the SBI's balance sheet contains all revaluation reserve, general provision for bad debts, perpetual and subordinated debts, cumulative, redeemable and irredeemable preference shares. The risk-weighted assets of SBI will be presented by my teammate Isaac. Thank you.
Thanks, Bharat. Good evening, sir. As my friend said, capital adequacy ratio deals with both core capital as well as risk-weighted assets. Now, some of the risk-weighted assets of SBI Bank are cash, loans, investment, etc. Now, SBI can calculate capital adequacy ratio in two ways. That's our on-balance sheet and off-balance sheet. In on-balance sheet, risk-weighted amount can be calculated by the formula value of asset into risk weightage, and for non-market rated, that's off-balance sheet items, risk-weighted assets value can be calculated by credit equivalent into risk weightage, and the last risk-weighted assets value can be calculated, which are market related, by credit equivalent into risk weightage. Now, the quantitative disclosures of SBI as on 31st/12/2011 were had Tier 1 capital as well as Tier 2 capitals. Some of the items which came under Tier 1 capital are paid up share capital, reserves, innovative instruments, and under Tier 2 capital amounts were as debt capital instruments eligible for inclusion in upper Tier 2 capital, and subordinated debt which came under lower Tier 2 capital. The capital adequacy ratio of SBI as on 31st March 2011 was 11.60%, of which Tier 1 capital was 7.59% and Tier 2 capital was 4.01%. Apart from this, SBI raised capital, the upper Tier 2 capital as well as lower Tier 2 capital during the year 2010 and 2011. Subordinated debts were raised through private placements of bonds. Some of the placements of bonds were unsecured, long-term, non-convertible, and redeemable at par. SBI can raise and were able to raise capital in four ways. First, through stakeholders. They can raise capital from stakeholders by just to the way the organizers of the bank putting their own money from their pocket. Second, the shareholders. The number of shareholders and the individual contribution can vary. As with another kind of partnership, this kind of financial relationship too is such that every stakeholder earns from the profit in the proportion to the investment made. Third, SBI can raise capital through financial markets. Bankers look to other sources in raising capital. For instance, they can buy from the financial markets. Fourth, but not the least, the government. The final and the last source for capital for the banks are the government. In governments, they play their role in the free markets. Now, the ways to increase capital adequacy ratio. There are two ways to increase capital adequacy ratio. First, to increase the capital, that too Tier 1 capital. They can increase the capital first by increasing the reserves. Second, by increasing all the general provisions, for example for bad debts. Third, by increasing the cumulative, irredeemable and redeemable preference shares. Thank you, sir.